Hi, and welcome to the Bleeding Edge podcast. I'm your host, Ralph Benker, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Emile Ogier. Emile, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ralph. Looking forward to another episode.
Good news, AI is going to the cloud. Bad news, the cloud is now a data center that needs 183 terawatt hours and apparently a satellite with an NVIDIA GPU. We're 1/4 away from ChatGPT asking for space rent.
Well, it sounds like at least comedians, their job security is still covered for now.
Absolutely. Hopefully, we can get some comedians listening to the show, and maybe they'll send us some original jokes that actually work. Now, having said that, that particular story about 183 terawatt hours is actually real, and space rent is also a real possibility. It just won't be very funny. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But up next, the news headlines in 60 to 90 seconds, because I can never seem to get it done in 60 seconds. So here we go. I know some of these stories will inspire you as well, Emile. So we'll dive into a couple of these. Right, macro markets forecast revives the AI bubble nerves. So this is really a story about Oracle posting their results, and their shares have taken a bit of a dip. They are profitable as a company, but the market is no longer rewarding AI spend automatically. We're looking for ROI, apparently, people. Weren't we always? But maybe we're starting to get a bit realistic with the investment in AI infrastructure and the like. Reuters, in the second news item, Reuters is charting the AI investment wave, and actually they're basically calling the AI investment as a macroeconomic factor because it's having such a big impact on the market. So basically, their news is all about the AI bubble versus repricing reality. The third news item is infrastructure and the AI factory. So the news story that has been broken by Pew Research Center is that US data centers used 183 terawatts an hour of power in 2024. So that was roughly 4% of US electricity. I can only imagine what it is in 2025. But obviously, you've got to think about this. From nowhere, we are suddenly adding significant power demand. And this is happening across the world. But not only are we using an enormous amount of power, we are also using an enormous amount of water. And this is one of the reasons why moving the data centers into space is a story that is also garnering quite a lot of news, because obviously we can use the sun's power and we don't have to use water for cooling because space is pretty cold. The fourth news story is Oracle's AI build-out raises the debt-funded AI factory concerns. So if debt gets expensive, which is something that might happen, I see that we are seeing interest rates actually decreasing. But if debt does get expensive, then the compute roadmap changes because, that investment will change. But as we were talking about last week, so much investment going into infrastructure build. So a lot of cabling companies, a lot of building companies are actually raising their own finance to support this infrastructure build out, and the broader economy is going to be affected if these guys stop spending. The fifth news story, infrastructure, but make it sci-fi. So this is the news about the AI data centers. We've obviously spoken in the past about Project Stargate. Gosh, I can't remember which one it was now. The Google initiative with Planet, where they're building new satellites. It's not actually called Stargate. What is it? It's something else. I'll have to figure out the name. But StarCloud has claimed that it has actually trained the first LLM in orbit. I think StarCloud is a Chinese startup, and they've used some NVIDIA H100s. Obviously, this is really important because if we can move compute off planet, then there are a lot of economic advantages to that. Story number 6, which I know you're going to dive into, Australia's under 16 social media law has come into effect. So they are basically stopping teenagers under 16 or children under 16 being able to access social media. I know that there is a challenge by Reddit. They're saying we're not a social media platform. Presumably, there are a few others as well that are going to try and claim that. Is item number 7. AI apps and tools are really becoming part of an ecosystem. So this is the news that Adobe has brought Photoshop and Adobe Express and Acrobat into ChatGPT. So this is a little bit like your iPhone or your Android phone actually having preloaded devices, and these tools in particular are becoming part of the user interface layer. So it's not just a chatbot, but you've actually now got these embedded tools. News item number 7, commerce and agents. So Shopify have released 150 new features that are driving their agentic storefronts. And they've also launched a feature called SimGym, which is simulated shoppers. So why this really matters is SEO becomes the agent answer engine optimization, and selling to bots becomes normal. So this is the agent to agent protocols that are starting to come in play, where your agent can go and shop on Shopify and buy stuff on your behalf. News item number 7 is EdTech funding. So an interesting startup called Obo just raised 16 million in Series A funding, and their big thing is that they are building out AI education as a platform. Will be interesting to see what's different about how they are approaching it compared to the learning mode in ChatGPT, and Gemini actually has something quite similar as well. News item number 7, the last one is the Meta Signals. Times names the architects of AI 2025 Person of the Year. And I believe that's Jensen Huang, which is no surprise. So we'll talk a little bit about his background story as well. So anyway, those are the 10 news items that I picked up for this week. So why don't we jump into your first story, Emil?
Thanks, Rolf. It's an important point, specifically with you covering on infrastructure. An important consideration. I've seen quite a lot of noise regarding who's ultimately going to be picking up the spend, because these mega factories or mega infrastructure plants are moving into new regions, countries, and towns. And it's a legitimate question being asked by the country folk or the people of the area. They're saying, why do we have to pick up these exorbitant electricity bills? How is the ROI going to filter through to our region if we're going to be supporting this? One to watch, and I'm just really curious where that goes, really, if it's going to be subsidized or absorbed by regions. But moving on to my first piece, thoughts as we're approaching end of year, it would be a good opportunity to take a view of market capitalizations for the top 10 AI giants. And it's worth pointing out that these are measured in either trillions. Yes, you heard that right, trillions, or billions of US dollars. NVIDIA remains at the top of the leaderboard. NVIDIA is at 4.4 trillion, Apple's at 4.2 trillion, Alphabet, Google at 3.9, Microsoft 3.6, Amazon 2.5, Broadcom 1.8, Meta Platforms at 1.6, TSMC 1.5, Tesla matching that at 1.5, and lastly, Oracle at 592 billion. So there you have it, pocket change.
Wow. I mean, just incredible list in the trillions. I know Broadcom had a bit of valuation that got rubbed off because they weren't really delivering the ROI on some of their AI investments. But for the rest of them, yeah, some really interesting company there, and incredible to really think of Oracle as the smaller player.
Indeed.
Only billions, not trillions in valuation. That just kind of goes to show the incredible growth that these companies have experienced. Who would have thought we would be talking about valuations in the trillions and in the high trillions? So that is a very interesting change in market caps.
What else you got, Rolf?
Well, I have an interesting story this week really about AI coding, and it's kind of some research that I've been doing because there's been a lot of chatter on LinkedIn, especially about vibe coding and the death of vibe coding. And this has been brought about partly by a decline in what I would call consumer vibe coding. So vibe coding is obviously when you jump onto a coding assistant, something like Lovable or Replit or Firebase Studio, and you can have a chat and it builds an app or it builds a website. And one of the things that we've started seeing is that consumers are churning on those particular sites or apps. And one of the reasons is because they don't really build production ready applications in the hands of inexperienced users, but in the hands of experienced users, you can have some success. And of course, an experienced user in this case, we might consider somebody that is quite technical or even a developer. And I think, you can have success even as a non-technical person with just putting in some guardrails. And certainly I've had some success, even though I am not considered a developer, though I know my way around the technology environment. And, the challenge that even I've had is, can I actually make something that's production ready? And the big scare, I actually posted about this week on LinkedIn, that we've had is that some vulnerabilities in versions of Next.js and React have been found and are actively being exploited. And so, most users don't even know what languages they're coding in. But there you have it. If you have coded in these versions of React and Next.js that actually have these vulnerabilities, it means that hackers could very easily hack into your system. They could be running all kinds of things, mining crypto, for example, on your servers, and they could use that as a way of piggybacking, into your system and getting access to credentials and exploiting those. And this is actively happening. And in fact, if you jump onto Vercel or any of your coding applications, you will see them all pretty much have this warning that they're calling out. And what it means is, if you don't know what you're doing, you would just merely go along with the recommendations of your AI coding partner. And no doubt you could be using vulnerable versions of these development tools. And of course, most people don't understand patching, and they certainly don't understand how to select versions that are not vulnerable. So security becomes a major issue, especially for retail and consumer users of these platforms. So what I did was I actually had a look and said, well, who's doing a good job of using these tools? And Anthropic actually just recently released some interesting research that I thought, I'd quickly take us through. And basically what they did was they took an internal view at just how Claude Code is actually changing how their own engineers are working. And because, a lot of people are quite critical about vibe coding, they're calling out, these tools aren't really able to provide support and provide production ready code. So Claude Code is one of the most capable models. And so if we think about Anthropic, the makers of Claude Code, just, what benefit are they really getting out of using these coding assistants? And their internal look basically surveyed over 100 devs and looked at around 200,000 coding sessions. And basically what they've come up with is that AI coding assistants are like giving every engineer a small team of tireless juniors. So just to kind of frame this, Anthropic are at the front end. They're at the bleeding edge, if you like, of what's going on with this AI revolution. And their engineers are using Claude for about 60% of their work. And they are estimating that they're roughly 50% more productive than they were a year ago. And this isn't just, the same work slightly faster, but a quarter of the AI assisted work simply wouldn't have happened before. And this is fascinating because they're actually creating net new benefits. And so this is stuff like building dashboards that just wouldn't have had the time to actually create. Devs are also becoming more, full stack aware. Backend people are actually shipping front ends. Researchers are building dashboards. Security folks are understanding unfamiliar code bases, all by pairing with a coding assistant model. So I think Opus is their latest. I'm actually using Opus at the moment, and the assistants cover gaps in knowledge. That means that they can become more full stack aware. Instead of waiting for other teams to answer questions, they can actually use their coding assistant to support. And one of the things I will say is that, debugging, for example, and reviewing code are some of the ways that they leverage these coding assistants. So it's not just about purely writing new features. It's also about actually using the coding assistants to understand. So if you are doing a security review, obviously, you can plug the code into Opus or one of Claude's models and get it to decipher what you're looking at. So there are some real benefits that they're experiencing, but there are also some changes. So I think what they're calling out is nobody's quite sure what it means for software. And, having a career 5 years from now, I think, we're going to see things change quite significantly. But for the moment, we can see that it's really supporting these devs and enhancing what they're doing. And some of the quotes that I think it's interesting, it's like every engineer suddenly having 5 juniors who never sleep and never complain about documentation. Another quote, roughly a quarter of the work Claude helps with simply wouldn't exist without it. It's not about efficiency. It's just a new surface area. And then another quote from another dev is AI is turning specialists into full stack generalists. Backend people are shipping front ends. Researchers quietly becoming tool builders. I probably fit into that camp. The paradox is the better AI gets at writing code for you, the harder it is to stay good enough to safely supervise it. So a little bit of a scary watch out. And the last quote, developers are starting to describe their jobs less as I write code and more as I manage and review a small army of AI agents. And that probably gives us a little bit of a glimpse into the future for all of us. You're not managing the work, you're managing a swarm of AI agents that are cracking on with the job 24/7. So hopefully that gives us a little bit of a realistic view. I wouldn't call, the close on coding assistants just yet. I actually think these tools are interesting to get people involved in building their own apps. I just think we're kind of calling out the reality that for the most part, 99.9% of what consumers are building probably will never see the light of day as a production ready app. And that's, where the realism needs to set in. The criticism obviously is these companies are happily taking your money in exchange for tokens, which you are feeding these machines to build your software. And that's great. It's driven stratospheric valuations for them. But on the other hand, a lot of people are also exiting those platforms, not really getting anything useful out of it. So there we go. Looking to Anthropic, they're certainly getting benefit, but, that's in the hands of highly experienced users.
You're absolutely right, Rolf. And it's an important distinction you made there. I think there's two key lessons. Is one, when we look at opinion polls and statistics and experiences on vibe coding, there's two distinct camps. There's the dabblers, the ones that aren't just trying it out, wanting to get their teeth into it, and then there's the professionals. But either way, it's exciting space to be in. There's a lot of potential in it, but be careful. Don't assume that everything's going to be done for you. Thanks for that. Moving on to my piece, the next thing, a really interesting article I found this a couple of weeks ago. Was from Dr. Pero Mechich. He raised the question, what would be the hourly cost of work for a humanoid robot? And shared his detailed cost projections. He has conservatively calculated a production cost of $30,000 and an operating cost of $30,000. However, $10,000 is for human oversight and likely to be too high an estimate. With operating time set at 6,000 hours, which equates to 330 days a year and 20 hours per day, and equivalent to the working time of 3 people, with work speed assumed to be matching that of humans. It is likely that most manufacturers will offer robot as a service, RaaS, because it will lead to higher revenue margins, and to expect an initial one-off fee roughly equal to the manufacturing cost plus a periodic usage fee. Is that humanoids will be highly profitable, so demand will ramp up quickly, and many suppliers will enter, so a sustained overly high monopoly of pricing is unlikely. Based on these assumptions, humanoid work hour will cost at most $14 an hour. And with learning effects and scaling, that price will drop even further down to $10 per hour and will continue to drop. By comparison, skilled workers fully loaded hour is $42 an hour. This estimate yields roughly $200,000 of annual savings per robot versus 3 human workers. So, what are the strategic consequences? In competitive markets, companies will have no real choice. First, to replace labor shortages, and then to replace existing roles. What do you think, Rolf?
I mean, we really are hitting something that on the Daily AI show, they called out as the labor bubble. So that was quite an interesting take on it. And in this particular podcast, what they were discussing was that, we have been living in a labor bubble for a long time. And when leaders have the option to hire humanoids or to automate, they pretty much have to take it. The commercial benefits are just too great to avoid it. Obviously, what happens when we no longer are able to hire and employ huge armies of humans, and instead we're employing huge armies of humanoid robots? That is the big question that we're all asking ourselves. And it's obviously driving the conversation around universal basic income, pretty much going back to the model that they had in Saudi Arabia, where up until I think 10 years ago, many people were being paid not to work. That's started to change, but it looks like they had the model right back then, even though they've changed it since. So will we all be getting paid not to work just so that the humanoid robots can do the job for us? And if so, how is all of that really being funded? I don't know. But I think it's just a bigger question. So that's the first thing I kind of thought about as you were telling that story. The second thing is I've been watching a lot of demos of these humanoid robots. And there was one in particular in China of a robot that was cleaning a toilet. And of course, the comments were absolutely hilarious. A lot of people were really impressed with it, but this thing was taking the cloth and it was wiping out the bowl of the toilet and then wiping the seat. I mean, it was basically just spreading whatever mess was there all over the place. So I think it was an anti-cleaning campaign. There was nothing clean about it. And then it went on to wipe the basin. And so it was just quite horrendous. So I don't think these robots have got it kind of figured out just yet. I know that, you kind of said that it will be equivalent of a kind of a human effort, but everything that I've seen is they seem to take 10 times longer to do anything. And so, if you don't mind waiting for your cup of tea, then fine. It might be cold by the time it gets there. Presumably they'll have some way of heating it with their, laser eyes. But I think we're a little way off. It's an exciting space. It's very creepy. There's one thing having a robot vacuum cleaner kind of, moving around the house, but an actual robot that, is the size of a human being. It's moving around. I don't know. It's a bit creepy for me. I'm not quite ready to go and lease one of these things. But no doubt it'll make its way into the service industry. And we'll have to see. We'll have to see if they actually function long enough and accurately enough to really be viable. I mean, they'll get there, but it's going to be a little while yet, I think.
I'm with you on that one. I also feel more creepy vibes than excited vibes for now. But I've always been quite a stickler on privacy. I've just wondered in scenarios, even when they've got the robotics right for these humanoids, it takes a simple hack. They're in your home. They're listening and seeing everything that you're doing. It's private space. That can be shared on the internet. So there'll just be new kinds of exposure that we'll need to address.
Yeah, I think there is a huge opportunity for it to go wrong, and I don't know. We'll have to wait and see what stories will come out of that. And one of the things I have been looking at, which I think is an interesting segue from your story, is this concept of, I'm just going to look for it here quickly. I've got some research that I want to pull up. But this concept of these single event upsets. I can never quite remember the name. I call them bit flips. And I have spoken about bit flips in the past, certainly in the context of Google's tensor processing units, which they're putting into the space data centers. Their idea is to test these things, and they've been hardened for the conditions of space. And mainly the problem that we have is with radiation, because essentially you can have subatomic particles hitting your hard drive, and it causes, something called bit flips or single event upsets. And as we know, all information is stored as zeros and ones. And so a bit flip is essentially when you cause a zero to become a one or a one to become a zero. And I think there are on Earth, there seem to be two big culprits for this. So high energy neutrons created by cosmic rays hitting the atmosphere. And the second one is alpha particles from tiny radioactive contaminants in chip materials. And in space, we also have heavy ions and protons from cosmic rays. And so they hit your hard drive and they change the information on the hard drive. Now, actually, this is nothing new. We know about this all the time, and we have built systems that are redundant. And I just, recent news story that came out was about a JetBlue Airbus A320neo that suddenly pitched down at cruising altitude, and it injured passengers, and there was a global software alert. And of course, the main suspect here is a single, there I go again, bit flip, basically, a single event upset. And they've had to go in and patch the software. Now, in this particular case, it affected the software that manages the elevator and aileron computers. It's called ELAC, and it glitched as a result of a suspected bit flip from cosmic radiation. And we've seen that Egypt Air in particular were noted for solving this problem very quickly without even grounding their fleet. So they basically just uploaded some software to deal with this. So this is something that happens quite often, actually. And as we increase what I would call, the attack surface area by adding more humanoid robots and ever more compute being processed out in space, we have to think about actually building the redundancy. And this was something that I think we first picked up with the Apollo missions. They used something called core rope memory and magnetic core memory. So bits were stored as tiny magnetic rings, and they're quite resistant to random particle hits. But again, I believe that they had 3 computers. And so whenever a decision was made, you basically had to have at least 2 computers saying the same thing. And if the third one didn't, then they basically put that down to some kind of bit flip corrupting the data. So now, in modern computing, we actually deal with this. We're always looking for anomalies in the data, and there are many algorithms that solve this. We have ECC memory, which actually solves this. And so this is something that broadly we have dealt with. But I think, we have to ensure that we've built this level of redundancy into all of that equipment. And you can just imagine, a robot being hit by some cosmic radiation, and suddenly its human alignment changes. And instead of looking after you, it starts to do weird things that you might not consider very helpful at all. So, probably a little bit of fear mongering there on my part. But I just think, this safety is really important. And it's not like this isn't happening. Here in the last few months, we've had this JetBlue Airbus being affected by this. It's happened to many airlines over the years. And in my research, I even found a story going back into some voting, where they had a bit flip occur, and basically it changed the outcome of a vote. Suddenly, a guy that didn't have a lot of votes had a lot of votes, and they investigated it. They couldn't find any foul play, but kind of suspected a bit flip that was at fault. So we can expect more of this. And in my research, I've even found that, this is a monthly occurrence. And the point is, it only really makes the news headlines when we have software that doesn't fully accommodate for these kind of errors. And of course, we're even seeing this in aviation, which is very much aware of this. So how is this going to play out in our humanoid robots when we've got lots of obscure firms building this kind of software? That's the interesting story that I drew from that.
Rolf, I totally agree with you. I think it's important to be concerned and careful. This is powerful tech that we're playing with. It's got a lot of potential, but it's got a lot of downside potential too. So yeah, need to stay focused while we drive this powerful beast.
Absolutely.
I'll pick up on the one of the news flash items you covered earlier that you mentioned, Australia's new social media ban for under 16s. That just went live this week, and it's already a circus. Kids are beating advanced facial age checks by uploading photos of a golden retriever. Yes, you heard that right. Actual dogs. And getting instantly approved on platforms like Snapchat, while others are using AI-generated adult faces or simply photoshopping a beard onto their own selfies. And the systems are waving them right through. Within not even 48 hours of the law being enforced, teens are back and they posting. Even parents are helping them dodge it. And the internet is having a field day calling Australia the ultimate nanny state. It's quite an embarrassing outcome, really. A government who has spent millions building a digital fence, and teenagers have torn it down with a picture of a Labrador. So, listeners, is this proof that banning kids from social media is impossible in 2025? Or is it just the opening battle in a much bigger war over who controls the internet? Let us know what you think.
Oh, I love that story. And yeah, I think this is a big problem. Maybe we can't regulate it. The genie is out of the bottle and it's not going back in. Bold and maybe valid move, but yeah, I don't think we can implement it. So what is fascinating, Emil, and I wonder where all of this will go. There's been a lot of news about sovereign AI, and this is we've even got NVIDIA building digital twins of countries. And these tools essentially will be able to do simulations and predictions. So it's a little bit like smart cities, which we've been talking about for quite some time. And there's been a number of implementations around that. But this really is a smart city at a whole nother level. And I know Taiwan have just implemented their sovereign AI. And you've also had Gemini actually going in to the military complex. They've just launched Gemini as a kind of a closed LLM environment for the US government. And it's been given a level of clearance, so it doesn't have top secret stuff, but this is stuff that will be limited for access by the US military complex. And I think now we're starting to see this concept of the sovereign AI really coming into effect. And part of that may well be managing access by age, some other aspects of segmentation. So that's only going to get stronger. And it really does seem like, we're seeing the forefront of innovation in AI actually becoming a regulatory battleground. So that's going to be really fascinating to see how that plays out. It might be a good idea to just talk about another ban in South Korea to do with how AI is being used in adverts. Have you picked up on that story?
I have done. Yeah, I can move forward with that. I'll start with China first, if that's okay. So China's digital wallet WeChat has a built-in map that tells users within a 500-meter radius who's in debt and who's been blacklisted by a social credit system. It essentially alerts users to who they might want to stay away from, lest their social credit score goes down. Tapping on a person marked on the map reveals their personal information, including their full name, court case number, and the reason why they've been labeled as untrustworthy. Identity card numbers and even home addresses are partially shown. It's pretty scary stuff. Meanwhile, turning our attention to one of the world's most tech-savvy markets, South Korea, when it comes to advertising and AI, the country is currently walking a fascinating tightrope between pushing innovation and tackling a major surge in digital deception. On the one side of the coin, South Korea's advertising market is rapidly embracing AI for efficiency and hyper-personalization. And on the other side, The problem really is that the rapid adoption of generative AI has led to a massive increase in deceptive advertising, particularly on social media. So, the government is now scrambling to contain the surge in false ads, often using deepfakes of celebrities and AI generated experts like fake doctors to endorse products. To combat this, the South Korean government is taking decisive action, which will require all AI generated advertisements, including deepfake celebrity endorsements, to be clearly labeled as AI produced content, with the new rules expected to be fully enforced by early 2026. These new regulations will also introduce punitive damages that can be up to 5 times that of actual harm caused. And critically, the laws will hold both the creators and the content and the social platforms responsible. This mandatory labeling and punitive damages represent one of the world's most aggressive regulatory responses to date against the dangers of AI driven deepfaking.
Wow. I mean, that it really is quite extensive. And of course, the story about WeChat and, this kind of social score that China has implemented, that just gets scarier and scarier. And I wonder, does all of this become a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy once you are branded untrustworthy? You just never ever get out of that spiral. So I actually believe that there are some millions of people that are stuck in the system. They can't get housing, they can't get jobs
Yeah.
because somehow, their social score doesn't allow them to. And you're essentially digital orphans. This is, I don't know if that's even a thing. We all know about digital nomads, but maybe these are digital orphans, and you're just marooned. You're marooned by the technology. You're marooned by your reputation. And of course, if your reputation is maybe even derived in error by the system, then that makes it even worse. And so I think I'm really concerned about how all of that plays out. China has been very happy to experiment with this, and it's got the kind of regulatory environment that allows it to do that. I can't see that working in other places. And I hope that it doesn't get widespread adoption. I'm sure there are some benefits, but I just can't see that you want that level of monitoring. And who knows, maybe this is something that Australia will give a go, given they are the ultimate nanny state. They're going to have to wear that badge with pride. But I think that's, just a very, very strange evolution of this whole story. I think probably with the move that South Korea made, we do need some accountability. I've been playing around with Google Flow over the last few days, really trying to test that platform. It is built as a movie maker, obviously using the VO model to actually generate videos. And I've been plugging in some of my own stills, trying to create adverts and the like, and, blown away by what's actually possible with these models. And of course, even now, when you upload onto YouTube, one of the things it says to you is, are you manipulating people, like real people, and maybe using them in ways that they don't know about? And so you have to tick a box to say, yes, you're doing this. It's AI generated, you've used real people, but it doesn't actually ban you. Mind you, I haven't ticked that box yet, but I might have to in my next video upload. So let's see, how all of that plays out. I think it's good for people to know that it's AI generated. My question just will be, what won't be AI generated in the future?
Yeah.
Because it's so cost effective to use these models to create what should be compelling entertainment, marketing, advertising. So, fascinating story.
Oh, thanks, Rolf. And I totally share your concerns too with where it's all going. Being quite a private person myself, there's clear delineated boundaries that I prefer to keep. But yeah, one to watch. If you think what we, not even harking back a few years back, what we considered entertainment now seems to be becoming a reality. I can think of 2 movies that come to mind: Judge Dredd and forget the name, the one with Justin Timberlake, when he ran out of credits and they got moved between tiers of civilization. It feels like the happening of that coming.
Yeah, not very exciting, to be honest. So let's move on to some other news that hopefully is a little bit more uplifting. And that is that ChatGPT is now a creative OS, so creative operating system. And this is the news that Adobe has basically moved inside the chat. I've actually tried this. I wasn't quite sure that I managed to get it right. It was a little bit weird, to be honest, but basically Adobe have launched the official Photoshop as well as Adobe Express and Adobe Acrobat inside ChatGPT. So essentially, what this does is it makes the chat the front desk for specialist tools. And you kind of have somewhat of a disintermediation of these tools because you're using them essentially inside the chat. So it's going to be quite interesting. Yeah, you've essentially got these tool vendors accepting that the primary interface is not their system anymore. It's ChatGPT or it's Gemini or it's Grok. And obviously, the capability is more about an ecosystem capability than it is about any one tool in itself. Now, I do think this is fascinating. I think this is how partnerships are going to make or break some of these platforms. And this is a really, really important evolution for how these tools actually maintain their growth. And so we'll have to see how that plays out. But, as I say, I tried it and I couldn't quite get to access the assets that were apparently developed within Photoshop. But anyway, there it is. I'll give it another go. Maybe it hasn't quite rolled out to my version of ChatGPT. So that's definitely one to watch, but I think it starts to really change the business model. You're not just going to potentially be paying for your ChatGPT subscription. You may well actually be buying a bundle or even buying into a marketplace that is actually sharing revenue across a multitude of tools. Pretty interesting evolution there. I kind of like it, but it'll depend just on how these ecosystems evolve to see how they polarize people to Grok or to ChatGPT or even to Gemini.
Yeah, I'm glad you raised that point. It seems looking across what the professionals are doing, the kind of the theme that keeps coming up for me at least is not only are people multimodal, but they multi-company. There's no one silver bullets, and the best designers and developers have the full suite available to them. So it will be an interesting space for the market, and I'm very supportive of anything that brings the prices down and keeps that availability open so we can do the best work possible.
Yeah, and it's a little bit like, protocols like Dolby, for example, or even, Intel Inside. So I don't know exactly what that does for some of these software brands. I think it might make it a little bit harder for them to win the hearts and minds of consumers. But this is, again, there is precedent for it. So I can see it working, and I'm all for the kind of consolidation. So what I have today is completely unscalable. I have 150 tabs open. I'm bouncing from tool to tool. And the biggest issue is that it impacts my productivity. I forget where I came from. I'm forever trying to find the browser that I was in. And so this is actually one of the biggest opportunities, I think, as we develop and move into ecosystem plays so that, ideally you just have the one tab and everything's accessible in there. Because at the moment, I would say that probably is the most damaging to my productivity, is bouncing around hundreds of tools. And unfortunately, I can't always close all these windows down because a lot of them are client projects. So, I tend to use 5 or 10 different tabs per client project. And then, of course, all the other things that I'm researching. I am using multiple desktops. I am using multiple tabs. And all in all, I think at the moment, I must have something like 150 open. Not only that, across different browsers as well, and different modes, incognito mode, logged in mode. And so, yeah, what that's doing to my RAM, I don't know. But, I do know. It's using it all up. So I think we've got a real opportunity to actually improve focus, to improve productivity, and to improve the investment cost of people accessing these tools. So yeah, that bundling is a pretty exciting move.
For sure.
What's
So
next on your list?
nothing else from me, I think. Just conscious of how long this podcast is getting on. Time is precious to our users, unless you've got anything else.
Well, I have just one item that I thought was interesting, and I'll be looking at this myself over the next week or so. And that is this news about Shopify really preparing for bot shoppers. So they have developed what's called, I don't know why it's called Shopify's Winter 26 Renaissance. That might be a typo somewhere along the line. Surely it's Winter 25 Renaissance. And they've shipped agentic storefronts. So this is a series of features that basically enable products to be surfaced to AI chats and also to simulate shoppers for testing using this SimGym feature that they have. Search is shifting, so people ask agents, agents choose products. And I think this really is quite significant because merchants have to optimize for agent readability. So that means their product data will have to be enhanced, policies, availabilities, optimizing for SEO has always been important, but we now also have what is called answer engine optimization and generative engine optimization. So this is going to be fascinating. Small age businesses get AI staff without hiring a team, and that AI staff are essentially helping you merchandise your products. I don't know what a storefront for bots looks like. Presumably it's just ones and zeros, but that's a very interesting evolution. One that I don't know. I don't know if people are quite, it's a little bit like when e-commerce came about, people were not that comfortable with putting their credit cards online. This really is providing a bot with the instruction to transact on your behalf. So, what are the guardrails? What are the rules? Who's accountable when it all goes wrong? So if this thing goes away and orders 1,000 pizzas and you only wanted one, somebody's going to have to pay. So I think there's a lot of regulation and policies that need to be worked out, but no doubt this is coming. I've predicted this 5 years ago. I think we will start to cede control of our purchases, certainly of scouting for products and finding the best price will be the job of your personal agent. And should the rules all align, then it may even go as far as transacting on your behalf. But lots to figure out there. Google did launch their agent to agent protocol some 3 months back. And this was essentially their attempt at solving some of these policy and infrastructure and communication definitions that needed to be put in place. And I'm also aware that the Linux Foundation have also set about some kind of agent regulatory body that they have formed, trying to basically create a standard for how agents communicate. So all of this is coming at a rate, and I think they will very quickly, within months, probably have solved a number of the communication issues, infrastructure issues, but more importantly, the rules that govern how these tools actually transact on behalf of humans. So watch this space. I think your personal digital twin is definitely going to become a reality in 2026. And I actually predict that this is going to be the biggest shift in commerce and e-commerce that we have seen since the invention of the internet. So I think that's very exciting, and it will affect every human on the planet that has a presence on the internet and that transacts on the internet, and therefore it will also affect every e-commerce provider. So fascinating to see Shopify really taking the lead there and basically releasing these new features. So yeah, very exciting. Given you have no news stories, I was going to, you have no more news stories. I was going to do our prompt hack for the day. And I think this one probably isn't one that I have figured out, but I tried to use something that is called tool router prompting, make a chat behave like an operator, not an author. So basically, this is where you write a prompt that forces the model to select a bunch of different tools, to pick a tool and produce a tight tool plan and then generate the final outputs. So after you've kind of had those tool results. So there is a prompt here you can use. I'll just briefly outline it. So you are my creative operator. The goal is to produce a podcast cover, or picture of your choosing, and create that as a square image, also generate a YouTube thumbnail, and a 3-slide social teaser. You then set out the constraints, readable on phone size, for example. Then step 1, you ask me for any missing brand inputs. Step 2, propose 3 visual directions. Step 3, choose the best direction and generate the exact tool actions required. Step 4, after I approve, output the final asset checklist and file names. So what this prompt essentially does is it will outline the exact process that you need to produce a series of complex assets, content assets, and you can then go away and actually execute them. Obviously, now that we're starting to see the likes of Adobe Express being integrated with ChatGPT will also be able to go away and call and coordinate some of those activities. I actually implemented this prompt, and I've gone off and had ChatGPT actually produce the assets rather than go away and interact with Adobe. I couldn't quite get it to do that. Some very interesting results. Definitely an opportunity to improve productivity by actually getting the tool to orchestrate what is a complex set or a series of activities. I will drop that in the show notes. Folks can give that a try themselves. But, we're really starting to see the ability now to have a series of activities and actually batch process, not just do kind of, one. Here's a prompt, give me a response. This is a series of responses. So one prompt and you get a series of responses out of it. So I'm going to be doing a lot more with that, and I'll do a better job of getting a ready-made prompt or hack for next time. But I think this one is still worth trying out. The last segment of the show that we've added for this week, and I hope to carry on with, is actually Who's Who in AI. So this will only take 30 seconds or so. And obviously, this week's persona is Jensen Huang, and really picked because he is on the Time cover as being somebody that is influencing the AI boom. So his bio in brief: Huang has become one of the most influential figures in modern AI because NVIDIA's chips underpin the training and serving for top models across the industry. This week, Time's Architects of AI framing put him front and center in the cultural narrative of AI as a civilization shaping force. NVIDIA's market cap milestones this year also made him a symbol of AI as the new macro. So this is obviously on the back of AI being a macroeconomic factor in the economy. What he's done, well, he's built NVIDIA into the dominant computer platform for modern deep learning. So much more than that, actually, he really bet on AI probably 13 years ago. He started this journey, and he's been an incredible leader, actually, to pull it off. Incredibly lucky, I would say, as well. But, this isn't somebody that has just appeared on the scene. He's been around since the inception of this. He's been driving it since, we really started to see that the LLMs could actually become a reality. And he's pushed this full stack GPU networking software ecosystem strategy. The next phase of AI competition is about the supply chain. So the supply of these chips and processing units. It's also about the supply of energy and the deployment. And NVIDIA really sits as the choke point. So this guy has put himself in the pipeline of every frontier model, and his influence shapes what available compute even means for everyone else. So this guy, he's cornered the market really at this point of GPUs. Obviously, you've got Google who've built their Tensor processing units, so they are definitely a viable alternative. China are pushing very hard for their homegrown models, and in fact, they're trying actively not to buy NVIDIA chips, but NVIDIA still has the strongest processing units on the market. So we'll have to see. He's built a business that now, has the biggest valuation, as you were saying, I think 4.3 trillion. Was that in euros, sterling, or dollars?
US dollars.
Right. So they approached close to 5 trillion, probably about 6 to 8 weeks ago. So that's come down a little bit. But there you go. Jensen Huang, everybody, a name that no doubt everybody has heard of, and a very interesting background story for him. So I think that's a wrap for this week. Emil, thank you very much.
Thanks, Rolf. That's very cool. I'm surprised we didn't make the list. Maybe next week.
Well, that's our goal. We're going to be on the list. I mean, the AI is kind of picking character of the week based on the news. If we can make some news out there for all the right reasons, I hope, then who knows? We might be. I'm still bathing in the glory of Gemini calling me a internet persona and therefore not allowing me to edit my own photo. But I think that's pretty much was my 5 minutes of fame as
I love
far
it.
as AI is concerned. But there's hope. And with that, Emil, we'll see you on the edge.
Thank you. See you soon.